up? In today's video, we're working on a Jeep Wrangler. We're going to be replacing the spark plugs. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of changing those out, and we're going to skip all the fluff. So come with me. So we need to remove the upper intake to get to 3 of the spark plugs. So a couple things you're going to need to do this job is you're going to need a manifold gasket set here. I will leave part numbers in the description. You're going to need a set of spark plugs, and then I also picked up a pack of gloves here because I'm a little girly and I don't like my hands dirty. We'll start by popping the hood, taking the top engine cover off. All right, I'm gonna get started by removing the air snorkel here first. Loosen up the hose clamp here at the throttle body. The threads here. I'm gonna leave this portion of it attached and just pop the lid off. So I'm gonna pop the clips for the air filter. There's one down here. Pop those. And then right here is gonna be 2 10mm bolts, and then these hoses are clipped in there. Pop that out. Pop this out, and then I'm going to get the whole assembly out here. Well, I guess my hose clamp was loose there. Interesting. There's a air temp sensor right here you need to unplug. Just squeeze the tab, pull it off. And then also on the air box here is a vent hose here. You're going to take that off. And the reason why I'm going to take it all off is so I can also inspect to see if I need to change any other things such as the air filter, which it is a little dusty. All right, the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to unbolt the throttle body. I'm going to leave it plugged in, and I'm just going to let it rest down here. So I've got a little 8mm socket here. Just 4 screws that hold this on. So any tools that I'm using in this video, there will be links for it down in the description of the video. That way if you need to pick any of those up, you can find those. So like I said, I'm going to leave it plugged in and just set it aside here. Okay, next I'm going to pop these 2 hoses here off the intake here, or the upper plenum. So this one just pulled off like that. This one's a little tougher, requires a pair of pliers. And I'm just going to give it a little twist like that. Then I can pop it off. Just leave them right there. They're good to go. Just pop these things out of the little clips holders. Now this wire loom is held on right here. It's got these Christmas tree style clips. I just use my pliers with the nose closed like this. Put it right on top. Little pop down, and it's out. Now we can unplug the map sensor here. Let's push it off to the side. Now also there's going to be for your brake booster on this side here. It's going to be a hose, same thing. Give it a little twist with the pliers. And then pull the hose off and just kind of tuck it over here on the opposite side of the AC hose here. So on the driver's side of the intake manifold, you got your oil cap here. If you look, there's a bracket right here. There's supposed to be a nut here and a nut here that look like this. So you're going to remove those 2 nuts there, and then also on the front here, there's supposed to be 2 right here. You're going to remove those. So as you can see, I'm missing a bunch of them, and then the ones that are there, they're already loose. So I don't know if somebody was working on this and left it loose, or because we off-road this vehicle, the vibration caused them to loosen up, but they're missing, so I'm going to have to scrounge those up. So go ahead and remove those 4 fasteners. Okay, now I'm going to jump back over here, and this foam pad needs to be removed. I'm just going to use some needle nose pliers and slide underneath here and just pry these little Christmas tree tabs up here. Kind of a pain in the butt. Try not to rip the foam pad. Okay, got that one. Get this one out. All right, got those out. See if I can work this foam pad out without ripping it. We want to reuse it. Okay. A quick little tip to make life easier when you're doing a job like that is get one of these little foam pads to put down here, because I like to climb up in here. You'll see me do it a lot. So this Jeep is lifted, so this makes life easier just to have a little foam pad here. You can jump up here and you can work on it, especially if you have a lifted vehicle. Just makes life a lot easier. I'll leave the link for it down in the description. Okay, so now we're going to remove the 7 fasteners. There's going to be 4, or I believe 4 down the side here. So 1, 2, 3, and then there's 1 right there. Just double check right here. So right there, and then 1, 2, 3, all 8 millimeters. And then I'll get you a close up to where these bolts are at. Just a second. So I wanted to show you real quick the fasteners that I just took out. So we start here in the front. We got the bolt here, follow it down the line here, 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 back there in the corner. And then we got the bolt here, here, here. Now we need this, where this main wiring harness is plugged in here, we need to unbolt it right here, here, and then we need to come over here where the AC line's here and here. And then we're gonna kind of just lift this up and push it off to the side. And then that should give us enough clearance to get the manifold out. So we're gonna try to come up, over to the left, and then clear these fasteners here. So it's gonna go kind of up, over, and then arc it out. So I removed the bolts here and then here, but it didn't quite lift up high enough. So a little further back right here on this bracket, if you go down below right here, there's a fastener there and a fastener there. Now, because I have no fenders and a lift, I can probably go through the fender well and see that. I'll show you that, what I'm talking about. If not, you just use an extension, like a 10 millimeter extension. There's the bolt there and right there. And because I'm fenderless and I got a 4.5 inch lift, I can get right in there and I can show you those fasteners I was talking about. So there they are right there. So there, there, and there. Okay, now that I got this bracket unbolted, and now I can push it to the passenger side here and lift it up here. I'm going to attempt to lift the intake up and then slide it over this way and then unhook it from the bolts over here on the side. So I was able to pull it sideways like that, and I got the front ones clear. Now if I can see if I can get the back ones clear. Just got to lift it up a little bit, and then one of the things is, if you look at the bolts, they'll fall back down and they'll snag. So what might help is get the bolts lifted up. Alright, I'm almost there. Millimeter. 2 away. There we go. The higher I can lift it up. There it goes. Now it came out. So it cleared the bolts on the sides here. And now it should come right out. Now in this video, I'm going to show you the main portion, the hard part, which is removing the intake, replacing those spark plugs. These 3 spark plugs over here are pretty simple. You're just going to unplug the connector here, unbolt the fastener. Same here. You can do it with this bracket on. It's a little tough, or you can loosen these bolts here and here like we're doing. Leave them loose and then kind of just leave it and float it around and get this coil out. And this one, they're pretty simple. Once you unbolt them, they just pull straight up, pull up and at an angle. So I have already done these 3. Okay, now that I got the intake off, we can take the foam pad off here. Just lift up on it. And now we can get to the bolts here for the coils and spark plugs. But while we're in here, what I want to do is really look down there and look and see if there's oil or anything like that down here underneath this is the lower intake here. And it's very common for this oil filter housing underneath the intake manifold here to leak. And if that's the case, if it's leaking, then we're gonna go ahead and remove the bolts here and here, and then lift the lower intake out. And now would be a good time to swap out your oil filter housing if it's leaking. One of the things I wanted to address is see how everything's wide open here, and if you're working, any debris, anything can fall in there. So what I'm going to do real quick is cover the ports up here so no debris falls inside while I'm taking out the coils and spark plugs. What I mean by debris, it can be leaves, it can be anything that could build up on the engine here. So I'm going to cover that up real quick. Okay, as you can see, I got a little something covering up the intake ports here. So now I'm going to go ahead and just unplug the coils and then unbolt the coils, and then we'll get these ripped out of here. So the coils just have a little squeeze tab, just squeeze and pull. Squeeze and pull. Sometimes they can get stuck, and I like to use a screwdriver to kind of push down on the tab and then pull them off, but these are coming off pretty easily. See, this one's a little tougher up, but it came off. Now that we got that swapped out, now we can go ahead and rip the coils out. Now the bolts are not going to come out of the coil, they're going to stay in. To get the coils out, you can give them a little twist. It has like a seal here, and pull straight up, and they'll come out like that. This one's underneath this little bracket here, so I'm going to have to get a ratchet. So you'll notice when I do these jobs, I use a lot of power tools, but you can do this whole job with simple hand tools like this right here. So I had to get the 1/4 inch ratchet here to get underneath the bracket here. So like I said in the title of this video, this job looks harder than it really is. It's not that bad. Just take your time with this stuff, and you should be able to knock this out with no problem. Alright, so now we're just going to get these spark plugs out. You just need yourself a little extension, a 5/8 spark plug socket. I like to do spark plugs by hand when it comes to removing them. If you use power tools on them, a couple things could happen. One, you could actually rip the threads out of, especially if it's aluminum block cars that you're working on, where the cylinder heads are made of aluminum. You could actually pull the threads out on them on some cases. Also, I'll show you here in just a second, which is pretty common with power tools, like if you use like an impact gun or air ratchet to break them free. Is where you can break the porcelain portion of it right here, and then that debris can fall down into the cylinder head and cause way more problems than it's worth. So I like to, for that application, I like to use hand tools. Another point I wanted to talk to you about is if you're doing this because of a misfire and you have like cylinder misfires on these cylinders here, I would recommend that you replace the coils. And also, if the valve covers can leak oil, then it's possible that they could leak oil down these tubes, and this would be full of oil. Not too bad on Chrysler products, but on other vehicles, it's pretty common where the oil will go down the tubes here, fill up, and cause the coils to break down and misfire. So because it's covered under the intake, you may want to consider putting a set of at least these 3 coils on. These 3 you can get to at any time, but these take quite a bit of work to get to. So it might be something you want to consider is adding coils to your tune-ups, at least these 3. So another tip is if you just do the 1 spark plug at a time. If you take out all spark plugs, now you got open holes here. So any debris could technically fall down in here and cause a problem. So to reduce that risk, I just do 1 spark plug at a time. So I took 1 spark plug out. Now I'm going to put the new one in, tighten that down, move to the next one, move to the next one. So now we're ready to install the spark plugs. One thing I want to recommend is buy the best quality spark plug that you can afford. I will leave links for the ones I'm using on this Jeep here in the description of the video. Alright, so next tip is these spark plugs that I have here are pre-gapped. Some lesser brands may not be pre-gapped. You just want to check it. You just want to make sure that it hasn't been smashed down or dropped or anything like that, so there's no damage. I've done this before where I forgot to check and the electrode was pushed down. You install it, you got a dead miss. You know, so save yourself a little trouble by just double checking. Also, I'm not going to put any anti-seize on it. A lot of manufacturers use a special coating on the threads here that do not require anti-seize, just check with your spark plug brands. I'm using NGK on here, and NGK does not recommend anti-seize on their spark plugs. It also can interfere with the grounding of the cylinder head to the spark plug, so by putting anti-seize. So I'm running it in dry, and if you look at the factory spark plugs, which I don't see here, so if you look at the factory spark plugs, you can see here that there was no anti-seize on these threads, so I don't use it. Now when you go to tighten these down, it's normally recommended to use a torque wrench, and they torque down to around 13 foot-pounds. Here at the house, I only have my larger torque wrench that doesn't go down that low. So I'm just going to use the old calibrated elbow here and torque these down to around 13 foot-pounds, which is not very much, so you should be able to feel it. What you're going to feel is when you tighten these down, they have this crush washer, and you want this crush washer to crush down but not like pancake out. So you'll feel this little washer kind of crush down as you're tightening it. It's just kind of a feel thing. And like I said, it's only 13 foot-pounds, so it's not very tight. And so you can see I'm going really slow, and I can feel it crushing down, and I can feel it kind of stop crushing down, and that's about as tight as you need to go. So now we're going to go ahead and swap out all those plugs, and then we'll start working on putting the intake back on. Now I got all my spark plugs done. I'm going to go ahead and pop the coils back in, and then get these bolts run down and tightened up. Make sure you plug them back in. Now that we got the spark plugs and coils back in position, we're going to swap out our gaskets here. I just used a little screwdriver or a pick tool to pick these O-rings out. Once we swap out our O-rings, then we'll work on putting the intake manifold back on. Alright, so in the making of this video, I made one little mistake. I forgot to put this foam pad that goes underneath the intake manifold. So when I was doing my cleanup, I noticed this sitting kind of tucked away. It kind of got pushed out of the way, and I forgot to put it on. So I wanted to show you this, make sure you put this back on. Now I'll explain to you what this does. So this foam pad is not for noise or anything like that. What this foam pad is doing is preventing the engine heat from heating up the intake manifold. So you want the coldest air you can get to go in the intake manifold, and this helps reduce transfer of heat from the engine to the manifold, so your air is cold going in, producing the most horsepower. So we definitely want to put this back in. So now I got to take this all back apart just to put this foam pad back in there. So don't make that mistake. Our new gaskets on the top of the upper intake or lower intake here. Now we're going to take the upper intake and go ahead and put it back into position. So I got it all wiped down and cleaned up. So we're going to go ahead and put this in position. So we need these studs here to mount in the brackets here. So the way you're going to do it is kind of tilt it down and in like this. So I got it. Tilt it down. You want to make sure all the hoses and stuff are out of the way. Cut it down. And in. On there, you should be able to not be able to wiggle around. Now you can go ahead and start all of the fasteners, so all of them like this. Once you get all the fasteners started, the proper torque spec is 9 foot-pounds, and you'll torque these down in a star pattern, kind of like you do lug nuts on your car, on your wheels. So now I'm just going to torque these down or tighten these down to 9 foot-pounds in that star pattern. So like I said, I don't have the torque wrench here at the house. It's at the shop, so I'm doing this all by hand. So 9 foot-pounds is not a lot. You just want to make sure you go in that star pattern, so you'll feel it get snug in about a quarter turn more. All right, so now these are all tightened down. Now you can start putting things back together, so you can go ahead and start plugging in the hoses, vent hoses here. Put them in their little mounting brackets. So they mount here on the side of the intake here. We'll work on the bracket here in a minute. All the electric connectors, button connectors, all that stuff here, you can go ahead and plug these back in. So you plug the brake booster back in, make sure all the little catches and clamps and everything are secure. Map sensor's plugged in, electric connector in. So we'll get the throttle body in just a minute. Now you can go ahead and start the bolts here and here, and go ahead and tighten those down. So this one was missing half of them. When I get back to work on Monday, I'll see if I can scrounge up some bolts for this. And I'll get some bolts for that. So go ahead and tighten that back up. So once you get that bolted up, everything bolted up and plugged back in, we can put the bracket in. After we get the bracket in, we'll work on getting the foam pads and all that stuff put back into place. So this is where you would do the spark plugs on this side. We've already done it prior to doing this video, so I showed you the hard side. Now what I'm doing is putting the bracket back in place. That mounts over the passenger valve cover here, and it mounts onto the lip of the intake manifold. Okay, now that the bracket is secure, everything's bolted down, the wire loom, all that's all reconnected here. Now I'm going to take this foam pad, slip it back over the intake here on the back side, and then put the little push pins back in here and here. So that portion of it will be done. Let's see. Try not to rip this. There we go. That's back in place. Push that down. Push that down. Good to go. Now, make sure everything over here is secure. Just double checking everything, which it looks like everything is. So now we're ready to put the throttle body back on here. So I went ahead and put the throttle body on. It's got a new gasket, everything on there. Put that on. Now we can go ahead and put their air filter and okay, so I got the air filter housing on. I got the intake boot on here. I want to make sure that the hose and the wire loom here is pulled up from underneath and over on this side, because it's going to clip in here. Now you can go ahead and put the two 10mm bolts here to hold it down. Tighten those up. Tighten up your clamp. Tighten up your clamp. And that's how you swap out the spark plugs on a Jeep Wrangler with the 3.6 liter engine.